Hey, so, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt like the world is just broken? Like the systems we live in, the way we work, the distance between people, it's all fraying at the edges? I get that feeling sometimes, walking through New York, or even just scrolling through the news. But what if I told you that this feeling, this very modern dislocation, has a birth certificate, and it was signed in blood and silence in the 14th century? Welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is The Great Conversation. Today, we're stepping into one of the darkest, yet most transformative, chapters in human history. This is Episode 9, The Great Dying, How the Plague Created the Modern World. We're talking about the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, it wiped out maybe half of Europe. Imagine that. Every other person you know gone. The scale is unimaginable. We remember it as a tragedy, a historical horror show. And it was. But what we often miss is that this catastrophe didn't just take lives. It shattered an entire world, the medieval world. And from its ashes, it forced into being the shaky, uncertain blueprint for our modern one. This isn't just a story about disease. It's a story about how collapse can breed creation. Let's set the stage. Before the plague, Europe was a land of scarcity and structure. It was a feudal pyramid. At the bottom, the vast majority were serfs, peasants bound to the land of a local lord. They worked his fields, gave him a share of their meager harvest, and in return, got protection and the right to barely subsist. Social mobility was a fantasy. The church was the ultimate authority, explaining a universe where your suffering on earth was a prelude to glory in heaven. Life was local, short, and dictated by traditions that hadn't changed for centuries. Then, the ships arrived. From the bustling ports of the Silk Road, carried by fleas-on rats, came Yersinia pestis. The plague moved with a speed and ferocity that seemed biblical. Within days of symptoms appearing, the fever, the painful swellings called buboes, a person was usually dead. Whole villages were emptied. Priests died last, giving the rites. So many died without any spiritual comfort at all. The world didn't just feel like it was ending. For millions, it absolutely did. But here's where our story turns. This total breakdown of the old order created a series of impossible, irreversible cracks. And through those cracks, the future began to crawl. First, the economic earthquake. With half the population gone, a simple, brutal law of economics took over: supply and demand. There was the same amount of land, the same number of estates and houses, but a catastrophic shortage of people to work them. Suddenly, the serf, the lowly peasant, held unprecedented power. His labor was valuable. If a lord tried to keep him bound to the land with the old harsh rules, he could simply leave, walk to the next manor over, where a desperate lord would offer him better terms, actual wages, for his work. For the first time, labor had a real market value. The feudal chain that bound people to the land began to rust and snap. This was the birth of a wage-based economy, the first tremors of a working class with some semblance of leverage. The old, rigid pyramid was crumbling into a more chaotic, but more fluid, marketplace. This leads directly to the Second Revolution, a crisis of authority. When the plague hit, the two pillars of medieval society, the feudal lords and the church, proved utterly powerless. The lords couldn't protect their people, and the church? It had always preached that suffering was God's will, a test. But this felt like abandonment. Prayers failed. Processions failed. The priests died like everyone else. The profound, universal trauma of the plague shattered people's blind faith in institutions. If the old authorities had no answers, people would have to start finding their own. This seeded a spirit of skepticism, a slow turning away from blind dogma that would later fuel the Renaissance and the Reformation. People began to look inward and eventually outward to human-centered explanations and solutions. And that brings us to the third, and perhaps most personal, shift, a change in the human psyche. Confronted with such random, agonizing death, the medieval focus on the afterlife started to bend. A famous phrase emerged from the era: eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. It sounds hedonistic, but think about the profound shift underneath it. If life is this fragile, then maybe there's value in this life, in enjoying the world we have, in individual experience. We see this in the art that emerges after the plague. Earlier medieval art was symbolic, focused on the divine. Post-plague art becomes more realistic, more focused on human emotion, on the details of the natural world. There's a dawning, painful awareness of the individual self. The collective, communal mindset of the Middle Ages began its long, slow transformation toward the individualism that defines our modern world. It's strange, sitting here in my apartment in Brooklyn, an engineer and entrepreneur surrounded by the ultimate symbols of a global, individualistic world, to trace a line back to a flea in the 14th century. But I see the connections. The plague broke the assembly line of medieval life. In that rupture, people had to adapt, to innovate, to think for themselves. The collapse of cheap, bound labor pushed technology forward, incentivizing inventions that saved manpower. The questioning of the church opened intellectual space. The new focus on this life would eventually fuel the explorations, the scientific inquiry, and the artistic explosion of the coming centuries. We are, in many ways, the children of that trauma. Our world of contracts instead of vows, of wages instead of duties, of personal ambition and existential doubt. Its roots are tangled in the soil of mass graves. Modernity wasn't born in a clean, well-lit room of ideas. It was forged in the desperate, surviving breath after a nightmare. So when the world feels fractured, when institutions falter and old systems creak, remember the great dying. It shows us that from history's deepest winters, unexpected springs can emerge. Not a gentle, planned growth, but a fierce, stubborn regrowth through the cracks. The world that died in the 14th century was, for all its stability, a cage. The plague, with unimaginable cruelty, broke it open. The path out was dark and terrifying, but it led, however crookedly, to us. Thank you for listening to this journey into a dark turning point. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with someone else who loves history's deeper connections. You can find more episodes and dive deeper into the great conversation at our home online. Visit Light Not Studios at https://www.lightnotstudios.com. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. Until next time, keep listening and keep thinking.